Hello, dear mamas. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to welcome Carolina Herboe on today's session. A couple of days ago, we talked about breastfeeding, and today we are going to talk about complementary feeding. Carolina is a passionate advocate for the foundational power of nutrition and guiding light for so many mothers on their journey to wellness. Born to a Chilean and English parents and raised in the beautiful south of Spain, Carolina brings a rich blend of cultural perspective and scientific expertise to her work. With a master's degree in diet and nutrition and an impressive career background in the pharmaceutical industry, her path took a profound turn after she became a mother abroad, navigating the challenges without the usual support of family and community. This experience ignited her mission to support mothers and families in meaningful ways, leading to the creation of her own nutrition focused platform. Through her work with Baby Nutrition by Carolina Herboe, she addresses the critical needs of families around fertility, pregnancy, breastfeeding, and complementary feeding, all rooted in her core belief that nutrition is the bedrock of our physical, hormonal, immunological, microbiome, and mental health. Carolina, I'm so excited for this conversation with you. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here on your summit.
All right. So my very first question would be could you please walk us through the signs that a baby is actually ready for to start the complementary feeding and how parents can know this is the right time?
Yeah, we've always tried to set a date for that, and we would love to have numbers, right? And a little bit like I mentioned during our talk, during the breastfeeding, nutritional breastfeeding part of the summit that I collaborated with, we did talk about the fact that babies and numbers don't mix very well.
Yep.
So, although the World Health Organization will say as from 6 months, we don't know really whether your baby, the baby you have in your arms right now, is ready at 6 months. What we're trying to find out, and just so you have an idea, is your baby's digestive system ready for something that is not just milk? Does your baby really need something more than or as well as the milk? That's why it's called complementary feeding, because we're complementing the milk. And also depending on the system that you choose to use, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a few minutes. Physically, is your baby can your baby handle different textures? Because whatever we give them, whether it's solid or whether it's a puree, it's always going to be different from the texture to milk, and that would be more of a physical developmental different changes that we'll be seeing in how they manage to move their tongue around their mouths, or whether they'll be able to grasp the food or not, or whether they're able to take it to their mouth, and that sort of thing. And that's what's also going to make it either we'll have to delay it a little bit or a little bit further forward. So what we're trying to do is like we're looking at our baby, trying to have like x-ray eyes to see, is that digestive system going? Do the cells need more nutrients than milk? Can baby move different textures around their mouth? How are they going to handle it? And it's a difficult one. It really is a difficult one. And it's nice to have that 6-month milestone sort of floating in the air. But that doesn't mean that if, you start to see signs in your baby before that, then give it a try. And if you find that actually you try it 6 months and it's an absolute disaster, if you have to push that back to 7 months, 8 months, 8.5 months, 9 months, it probably won't be the end of the world. And so that's the key. I always would rather say we're looking for signs. Your baby's body's going to let you know when it's time.
Yeah, I can absolutely confirm with that, because with both of our babies, we just saw that they started to be interested in the food that we were eating, because usually they were around us when we were at the table. And, when she was sitting there and started to reach for the food on our plate, we kind of knew that she was interested in trying something different than just the meal. Yeah.
Indeed. There's what we call a window of curiosity that opens up, and you need to take advantage of that. They suddenly become very, very interested in trying different foods, different flavors, different textures, or basically just sticking everything into their mouths.
Yes.
And that's it's curiosity. It's a way of discovering the world around them. Maybe they're not interested in eating, but it's curiosity. So you give them a mushy carrot and they can sort of play around with that. And maybe they're not ready to eat it, nor do they need to, but allow them to play around with that curiosity, because it's a beautiful window that actually opens up wide, wide, wide. And usually, and I don't want to program that this happens all the time, but then it kind of closes at about the age 2, when they don't want to eat anything.
Yes.
So
I
if
confirm
you
that
take
one
the
too.
opportunity, that window that opens up really wide at around 6 months, and it goes on for 7, 8, 9, at least past a year sometimes, take that opportunity, offer as many different flavors and textures as you can, because then that will definitely set them up for being more receptive to different types of foods later in life. That has been proven
Yes.
scientifically. So
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah,
signs
it's just...
indeed is when they, you mentioned that's a really important sign. It's that, oh, what are you eating? What are you doing? Actually, that's going into your mouth. It's disappearing. Hey, there's something here I'm missing out on. And instinctively you think, oh my gosh, I feel really jealous. I feel almost like guilty. Sorry, would be the expression. You kind of want to offer them. You think, what am I doing? Hang on, how old is my baby? This is really going to happen now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but it's I think, I absolutely love this first couple of months when they started to open up and they were interested about the food. We did baby-led weaning, but we tried not to be very strict about it. So if it was a bit more pureed or something like that, we offered it. Can you please, because there are so many different, there are three main different styles, as you can start the complementary feeding. So can you just please walk us through the main differences between baby-led weaning, the BLISS method, and the traditional pureed foods?
Yes. Well, indeed, the pureed foods would be probably how our generation were probably brought up on. You just need to ask, your parents, the grandparents, like, how was it done in your time? And probably it was pureed. And it kind of made sense because there was always this fear of baby choking. And suddenly we had the opportunity to puree foods. And then you actually spoon feed the baby. The baby doesn't really have to do anything, right? So it's the parents who decide exactly what baby's going to be eating, in which proportion, and then that's all blended up. And all baby has to really do is just sort of open mouth and swallow,
Yeah.
So it's a very passive role that our little one will take when it comes to pureed foods. And it gives the parents a lot of control over what they're eating, how much they're eating, how fast they're going to eat, they're going to finish that bowl. You know what I mean? And
how
I
clean.
just find, sorry?
And how clean everything is going to be around the baby while eating.
Yeah. I mean, feeding is always messy, but purees is almost elegant. Yeah, you can always.
Yes.
Yeah. Indeed. So I have to say, as a nutritionist, I love the purees because, you're getting in exactly what they need. And I remember making all those calculations and going, well, they still need lots of fats to grow because the breast milk has a lot of fat in there and we can get that in. And then these colored vegetables. And but you're not actually teaching your baby to eat. And this is where nutritionist Carolina has to step aside and Mummy Carolina jumps in. And this is the important thing, is that in our role as parents, I believe we're preparing our little ones for the real world where they don't need us. So, if you're taking away that power from day one to, I know how much you need, how often you need this, how quick you're going to eat it, then, at which point do you actually give that power back? And that was the main reflection around this whole other theory that came around the 80s, 90s, thanks to Jill Rapley in the UK. She was a midwife and she started to take down data about how different families were doing complementary feeding in this sort of anarchical way with no rules. And she was like, hang on a minute, let's give this a bit of structure. Let's give it a title. Let's write this book. And I highly recommend it. It's easy read and very well described. And she actually created this term, baby-led weaning, where it was just the baby who decided when to start, with what to start, how often. And she basically said, whatever you're eating, just hand it over to your baby after 6 months. And I have to say, I usually take that theory when I'm counseling families about this with a little bit of pinch of salt, because it's like, I know Friday night is pizza night. That doesn't have to be like that with the baby. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely, yes.
Or, on Sundays we all go to McDonald's. Well, maybe not a good idea. But, it's not exactly everything you're eating, but it is real food. And that's actually when the BLISS method, which came more from Oceania, out from Australia, around 2015, 17, don't quote me on this, which took Baby-Led Weaning and added 3 different rules to it and gave it a little bit more of a structure, which I like, because it's something that actually I'd been talking about since 2008, saying Baby-Led Weaning, but with a little bit of a structure there, because indeed there are some sort of foods that I find that we should try and avoid at the beginning, and I'm sure this resonates with you as well. You don't want to be giving them processed foods from day one.
No.
And of course, even as adults, however healthy you eat, there's always a bit of that in there as well. So so what BLISS did was take the Baby-Led Weaning method, where you're not puring anything, you're giving the baby the solid foods, but they have to have a certain texture. So ideally, baby can grab the food with their hand, but it can be easily squished. So what we're looking for is, I always say it's a miracle if it actually makes it to the mouth solid. So it's like more of a squish, 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 but it was originally solid. And this is actually good for starters, because they don't know how to chew with their jaws yet, with their gums. Their teeth haven't come through. They will learn how to do this. It's amazing how they learn how to do this. But in the beginning, it's basically almost just the tongue pushing the food up against the top of the mouth that is going to mush that food down. So you want it to be quite bland, even though it is solid. So let's say you're talking about a carrot stick. You want that to be quite cooked. So it's kind of solid but quite squishy. Or you want to really cook down the broccoli, for example, so they can take the stalk of the broccoli, but the flour is going to be quite mushy, something like that, let's say, as an example. And then what also BLISS takes into account, that the baby's iron needs do raise a little bit as from 6 months. So you're looking for foods very rich in iron. So we're not talking about, I've heard this recommendation here in Spain sometimes is, just give them raw red meat and let them suck the blood out. It's like, okay, there are other iron rich foods, things like millet is amazing. Lentils as well.
Yes.
Ironically enough, all these leafy greens, you might want to avoid things like spinach from the beginning, but you can definitely introduce them as much as you can. I love the trick of just chopping up some parsley or cilantro on that meal. There's certain seaweeds that are also very rich in iron, like wakame, and you can put a little bit of that in a soup as well, and play around with those. So that's going to help. And that's what BLISS has done. It's given just that little bit of a structure. And also what it takes into account is that your baby's stomach is very small, but your baby needs a lot of calories. So what they're looking for is very high caloric foods. And so you've got lots of nutritionally dense, let's say. Okay, he's insisting on coming through right now.
Oh, well, we have a guest.
He tried one way, he tried the other way. He was, what they when they get it in their mind,
He just wants to be there. That's
where
okay.
They're gonna go.
Be our guest.
I was trying not to lose my train of thought. Okay, you're done. You're just gonna sit there. Okay, lovely. Found me. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. That's just real.
Working from home.
Yeah.
Okay, so the third point that is amazing with BLISS is that the density of the food. So it takes into account these 3 things: the texture of the food, the iron in them, and that we need something that's nutritionally dense. Your baby has a lot of growing to do, but the stomach is quite small. So you're looking for things, for foods that are like sweet potatoes, sort of very nutritionally dense. I love like ground seeds, and when they can start eating nuts, like the nut butters, and it doesn't have to be peanut, but things like almond butter, cashew nut butter.
Oh, cashew. I love that.
Right? So they're looking for a lot of nutrient dense foods. So actually it's quite I like to think of it as a 2.0 version of Baby-Led Weaning. But all of these methods, Eva, I want the mummies to realize who are listening to us that it doesn't have to be 100% one or another or another. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if I'm jumping to a future question of yours, but
No.
don't feel stressed if you're going to try and give them pieces, but they make such a mess. And then grandma comes over and wants to help you out and give you the night off, but she wants to do the purees. That's fine. You're not going to confuse your baby. Okay.
Yeah. And they're not going to die of it. Yeah. Actually. Yeah. And that is something that I also had to learn, because with Lily, with our firstborn, I was kind of very strict about it. Like, I want to do baby-led weaning. And I was told that it's either this way or that way. And if I give her pre-aid, then she's just going to, choke on it and doesn't know what to do with it, because she's used to the solids. And then came Aina, our second daughter. And, I don't know, mothers just relax so much with their second child. And I was like, wow, if it's pureed, it's pureed, because I was drinking my smoothie and she was interested in it. And I was like, okay, well, try it. Go ahead.
Exactly. I think variety is key. And this is what we're beginning to see when it comes to the world of nutrition, especially when it comes to the word of microbiome. We mentioned also during our breastfeeding talk. The more variety of different colors and flavors and textures, that's enriching that curiosity that we're talking about, that window of curiosity that opens up there. And that's also the beauty about breastfeeding, because this has also been proven. And if you're not breastfeeding, please don't feel guilty about this. But for those of you who are, just be aware of one of the other benefits is that your breast milk changes flavor depending on what you're eating. So it's also been proven that babies who have been breastfed are open more to different flavors and textures than babies who've been bottle fed and receive the same flavor the whole time. So just to say that if you are bottle feeding, you still have that opportunity to offer them lots of textures and flavors and different herbs and spices during complementary feeding, and they'll definitely get the benefits anyway at that point.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's just don't feel bad about it that you have to bottle feed, because sometimes it's anatomical. You just can't breastfeed, no matter how much you would like to, and you still have the second opportunity to give the variety, and you still have the opportunity for a kid who is super interested in food and is going to eat very different kinds of foods. And as you mentioned before, that around 2 years of age, they just close this window. And it's so true. I could see it with my, especially with Lily, with our firstborn. Around 2.5, she just stopped eating the variety and went from eating, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different types of vegetables. We went down each month, one less, and now we are up to 2 or 3 that she's willing to eat.
It's awful. And I can tell you, being a nutritionist, Mom, I suffered it so much because you're making all those calculations. You're like, this is not good for you. What is happening? What have I done wrong? And you have to sort of breathe through it. And something I've noticed as well, though, Eva, is that, I know we compare a lot, but I hadn't discovered and didn't have the confidence for baby-led weaning with my first baby, but I did with my second. And I have to say that baby-led weaning also opens them up so much more to trying new foods. So I did notice that this whole being very picky and scared to try new foods and all this sort of thing to this day is very different between the two. My second child, whom I did baby-led weaning with, is so much more open. I almost have to stop him from making the craziest experiments in the kitchen. Like, no, you don't have to take a spoonful of vinegar straight up and see if it will come out of your nose. Ooh. I mean, it doesn't. Wow. That's just, you know what I mean? It's like, really, and there's no fear. There is this term that hangs around little kids' brains, neophobia. Okay, so, and you will discover neophobia the minute you go to a restaurant and open up the child's menu and you see that it's the same in every single restaurant, right? And some children live off, chicken nuggets, hamburgers, and sausage rolls,
French fries.
and that's
yes.
it, right? So, and then parents end up eating the same way. Now, what happened there, to adapt to all of this? And if often when you're giving your baby pureed foods, it's like I said, it's a surprise every time they open their mouth. They don't know the texture, they don't know the temperature, they don't know the flavor that's going to come in there, and they kind of sort of lost control. And they don't complain, and they actually eat very, very well. They digest super well. I mean, everything sort of goes in and is absorbed because it's all pureed. When it comes to baby-led weaning, they might eat 3 mouthfuls and then it comes out whole in the nappy, and it's like, this wasn't even absorbed, you know. So nutritionally, they're getting a lot more through purees, but that baby grabs hold of that food because they decide to hold on to that food, and they decide to take it to their mouth, and they decide to chew, and they decide to swallow, or maybe they decide to spit it out. They choose. They feel like they're in control when they're at the table. And that's the beauty of baby-led weaning and BLISS, that it's like a game for them. The table, they feel safe in that place. And so later on in life, I see this. You can take them to a Mexican restaurant, to sushi, to Japanese. They're happy. Like, let's try this. What is this supposed to be spicy? But how spicy is it? You know, like, whoa. It's beautiful to see that. And actually, I feel that it's more educational rather than nutritional, really. But in the long run, to grow into an adult like that is very healthy. So
exactly.
I think you're definitely investing all those months of squashing food and throwing it down and feeding it to the dog and feeding it to the cat and not anything going into your mouth, and everybody saying to you, what are you doing? This is stupid. Give them a puree. And you work your way through it, and all of a sudden you grows into this child who has better habits than anybody in the family, you know, and you're like, yes, it's my baby.
Yeah, exactly. And also they start to use their hands in a totally different way. So they learn to use, for example, the spoon much better than with the pureed food, because it's the same motion. They just have to, you know, kind of turn a little bit. And I could see that as well with our kids, because they learn to eat with the spoon and with the fork so fast. On contrary, others in the family who pureed fed their daughters, they are still struggling because they didn't have this coordination.
Indeed, Eva, but I wonder if there's something else you mentioned before that had something to do with that. And I think this is key, that also mummies bear this in mind. You mentioned something that some families don't do, but I see that you did, was we always used to have them at the table while we eat. Now, I know there are a lot of families who find it just so much easier to feed the kids, put them off to bed, and then have dinner, for example, or feed them lunch, get them to have a nap, and then I'll eat. And of course, it's so much easier for you. But if you're not eating in front of them, they don't have you as a reference. And a lot of them learn how to use the cutlery on the table just out of pure imitation. They just want to be like you, you know, and they see that you're not using your hands. So I want to do this, you know, and it's not just about manners. It's also about, I want to try what you have on your plate. That's pretty cool. And this window where it closes up and we're talking about eating 3 vegetables for months on end, if you keep putting those other vegetables on your plate and you're there with daddy going, oh, it's so wonderful, these came back in season, I love petit pois or whatever it is I'm eating right
broccoli.
Now. Exactly. They're like, there must be something in that, you know. And it really is, because they're copying us the whole time. They just want to be like us, you know, and we're giving that example. And we can't complain that our child only eats 3 vegetables if they never see you eat vegetables. What would their motivation be?
Yes, you know? Exactly. Lead by example. Absolutely. And I think one of the great things about BLW and BLISS as well is that it actually forces you to pay attention on your diet as well. So if you had things that were like, maybe I shouldn't be eating, now it's the best time to like, okay, now is the time that we forget about that and have the food that is really nurturing and healthy for us and for our babies. Because for our babies, we always have this desire that I want my baby to have the healthy food. But then I would just sneak out and have something not so healthy.
Of course. Well, this is what I always say about, you know, how important it is to see them to see us eat. And you're like, yeah, but I'm going to have dinner at what, like 7 o'clock? I mean, that's really early for me. Well, that's absolutely fine. It's really healthy. Get them. Everybody has dinner at 7. Put them off to bed. And if you need to get out anything you don't want them to see you eat, you can do that after they've gone to bed.
Yeah, you can do that afterwards.
You know, it can work.
Yeah, that's also a very good thing that you just mentioned, like eating at 7, the dinner, and that it's late. It's late here in Spain. I must add, because for us in Hungary, 7 o'clock dinner, it's something totally normal. Like by 7 o'clock, everyone would have their dinner and then bath time and all that. But even adults, we would have our dinner by 7 o'clock. And it's so much better for our digestion. So
Indeed, indeed. And there's something beautiful about the complementary feeding phase when your baby starts to eat and you start to question what you're eating. I always say that what we're aiming for when it comes to complementary feeding is that we're all eating exactly the same at around a year, when baby turns about a year old. But funnily enough, with baby-led weaning, that actually happens earlier, because what you're preparing for yourself, you're preparing for your baby as well. But you still have some time to clean up your diet. And then you will
yes.
find yourselves in a lovely little middle there, because obviously at the beginning you're not going to add any salt to the food, but eventually they do come to a phase when they start to ask for a little bit more flavor, and so it's a good moment for you to reduce the salt in your food, or maybe use a more unrefined sea salt or Himalayan salt. And then when they start eating salt, at least it's not the refined table salt, for example, whereas you're actually adding some minerals to their meal, and everybody's sort of found themselves in a nice common ground where you're not going crazy and cooking 3 meals different for
absolutely.
every member of the family.
No. There is no way. Then that I think, apart from all the scientific proof that baby-led weaning is really beneficial for your kid, I think one of the main reasons for me was also not going for parade is that I didn't want to be cooking for us and then cooking for the kids. I was like, no, I'm going to cook once and everybody is eating that.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. On the contrary, it might even be the better option. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Carolina, what are some of the common mistakes or misconceptions that parents might have about starting solids, and how can they avoid them?
Well, what could happen is you get this impression that it's going to be a steady slope in one direction. And it can be quite a shock when you find that your baby's eating quite happily, maybe 2 meals a day, and then all of a sudden they're not eating. There are days when they eat nothing. And that's a sort of a panic mode, especially for mummies. I don't want to exclude daddies, but there's something there's a very strong bonding mummy child with when it comes to nutrition. I know obviously daddies have a lot to do with it, but there's this instinctive thing. And when I got more into Chinese medicine, I understood it even more. Mummy nourishes, daddy protects. So it's kind of like, oh, if baby's eating, everything's okay, from this sort of instinctively, okay, I'm doing my job. And for them to suddenly close their mouths and not eat, you're thinking, oh my gosh, actually you don't even think it. It's instinctively, it's like panic. And there are reasons for them not to eat, but it's very easy to try and overcome that, not respect that, and then try and force feed them, and we have to, if we know the different reasons that could be behind them not eating, and this is something I always empower my families with, so that they can just breathe through it, just make sure they're hydrated, maybe they want a little more milk to get through the day, and then they'll make up for lost time. It suddenly clicks out of it, and they're fine. But if you start to distract them, or you're going through baby-led weaning and you start to puree and force feed them, or now with screens, it's like, let's get the phone out, let's get the tablet out. Baby's sort of like, and you're spoon feeding them.
They don't even know what's going on.
We got the meal in. Not really. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, but it's not no.
Once the reason for them not eating passes, your baby's going to want to start to eat. But excuse me, can I have this screen back? That was actually quite cool.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's really hard to go back to making your baby responsible for his or her own eating. So if we realize that it could be an immune system issue, I mean, there's nothing like maybe a vaccine your baby's producing antibodies for, or maybe, somebody coughed on them, or got
maybe it's just getting the cold and that's it.
Sneezed on him or something. Do you know what I mean? Maybe he's getting something, and the immune system needs to be in a fasting state to work better. I mean, we've all felt that. It's like, what's something's up, I'm not hungry, and then suddenly you get sick. So maybe that's it, or maybe it's a new tooth. I mean, that hurts. It could hurt. I mean, I've got this whole side of my face is burning. I don't feel like eating anything right now, and then that little tooth pops through. Okay, now where was my food?
Let's eat. Absolutely.
I remember going crazy because I was very sort of methodological. Like you mentioned, I didn't have much family here. I was on my own, starting my own nutritional business. And I just insisted that, she was going to have lunch and then she was going to have a nap. And she was exhausted. She didn't want to have lunch. She wanted to have a nap. Do you know what I mean? And she's sitting in a pushchair, crying away. And I'm like, yeah, but if I put her in my arms, she's going to ask for breast, and then she's going to suck, and then she's going to fall asleep. And then what about lunch? And it's like, oh, my calculations are going out the window. So I took her up, put her in my arms. Of course, she wanted the booby, crashed out, and probably had one of the longest naps she'd had in her life, like 2 hours, just like bam. And then the food was cold, but she woke up from that nap and starving. And she wanted that meal. It was like, yes, I'm ready for it now. And I'm like, it's 5 o'clock. Who cares?
Who cares? Yeah.
And
we have to learn to relax.
And the most important thing is that she had a good memory of that meal, that it wasn't a struggle, it wasn't a fight, it wasn't, then that's the important thing. And there are lots of, maybe suddenly baby's thirsty and you want to be offering water during meal times, but don't force them to drink, but offer them, because sometimes a little drink of water can help everything go down, and they did want to eat some more. There are lots of different reasons why baby won't eat, and just try and trust that if your baby has food in front of him or her, he's not going to let himself die of hunger with food in front. There will be a reason. Trust your baby's instinct.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one thing that we have to learn as mothers, that you have to trust your kid. It's a little human, but that human knows that human is still tuned into its instincts and intuition, and knows how to listen to his or her body. So when she's not eating, there is a reason for it, as you mentioned, and we just have to relax about it. If the baby is not eating, it's not eating, not going to die. I mean, they have, those little hams that where they are storing some extra. If they skip one meal, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. And if it wouldn't have been like that, we wouldn't have made it as far as we had as a human species. We need to trust that instinct. It's just like, trust your breast milk, trust your body, trust your baby's body. Obviously, if this goes on for too many hours, if baby starts to be lethargic, he or she might be dehydrated, you really need to watch this. But for skipping a meal or two, or especially if they don't eat but all baby wants is breast milk or formula, then it probably is an immune system issue. Just accompany them in that procedure, and they can go back to living off milk for 2-3 days while they're sick, and then go back to food. I mean, it's a bit like that. You'll take 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back, and that's something that I don't think anybody explains families when it comes to complementary feeding. And you think it's going to be this, and then the breast milk is going to stop and the formula is going to stop and they're going to eat more and more and more. Sorry, but I mean, to burst your bubble, but often at around a year, the main part of baby's diet, if they're allowed to choose, is probably still milk, especially if you're breastfeeding. I do see that if baby's formula fed, often they do accept complementary feeding a lot better, because the formula is not so perfect for their body. But if you're breastfeeding as much as baby wants and not measuring times or distances between feeds, if they're allowed to choose, often at around a year, breast milk is still number one.
Yes, totally agree. I have been there with both of them, and especially with Aina, I saw that because she was very prone to gastroenteritis, and when we were going through that time, all she wanted was all the time just breast milk. And I remember that she was like 2 years old, and she would just breastfeed. She wasn't interested in anything else, and here she is running around.
There you go. And you need to listen to the breastfeeding talk to learn why that was so important for her microbiome while she was releasing all of those little guys out, of course. And that's it. If you let baby choose, your baby is going to choose what is going to help her grow more. I mean, that's their instinct. So if they choose milk, it's because right now my digestive system can get more energy and more nutrients out of the milk them from the food. If you're forcing them to take food and not giving them the milk that they might need, maybe you're filling their little stomach up with some food that they're not even able to digest, that is not even going to be able to form part of their cells, that they're not even going to be able to absorb. So you're filling up their food with something that's not going to help them grow, and that goes against their instincts. So what you're actually doing then is saying to them, I know more than you, or this book, or this pediatrician, or my neighbor, or my mom. We all know more than you, little baby, what your body needs. And then what the message that your baby receives is, okay, I need to get the information about what my body needs from outside. And then we grow into these human beings that, and I see this in my consultancy at the age 30, 40, 50, saying, I don't know what to eat. I don't know what my body wants. I don't know how much to eat. I don't know when to stop. Am I really hungry? You know, because as babies, we've had that taken away from us.
So
and
powerful.
and it's scary, you know. I need to do this course, or I need to watch this YouTube video. I need some external information to tell me what my body really wants, or to do some sort of therapy practice to get back in touch with my body. I mean, you love your yoga, Eva, you understand with this, and connecting back with your body. What does my body really need? Because I don't know, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true that by forcing this food, we are totally tuning out their own intuition. We are taking away their power, and they are going to have less confidence in themselves because they feel like, I don't know, I always have to have someone else confirming me what I need to eat or what I need to do. And I think I find it super powerful just to see like how one thing can affect not only how they are eating, but how they are going to live, how they are going to think, how they are going to feel about themselves later on in life. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, you're definitely making those foundational steps to the future relationship they're going to have with their food. Not to put any pressure on. Sorry.
Yeah,
But,
no pressure. I like this, no pressure.
Like, we're going to help with, if anybody wants a handout of the foods that I recommend, definitely you can have this. That'll help act as a guide that you can hang up on your fridge, and at least you know what to offer. But basically, I think the message here is just as long as you know what to offer and how to prepare it, which is what we've explained with the BLISS and the baby-led weaning, just let your baby decide how often, how much, at what frequency, how fast I'm going to want to eat this, how slow I'm going to be. And I think that's it, really. Summarizing it.
With that said, is there any food that parents should avoid offering in the early stages of complementary feeding?
Well, there's a lot of debate out there right now, because when I started in this world, it was always like, oh, be really careful with the foods that are highly allergenic. Now we're beginning to see that we shouldn't offer them too late in life, because this could actually increase the risk of allergies. Now, having said that, I would definitely not start out in your first week or month with peanuts, with soy, with eggs, with nuts. For example, obviously I would leave the highly allergenic foods for that moment when you realize this is really working. Baby wants to eat. And so I would definitely start out with the easier to digest foods and the less immune boosting, let's say, foods, for sure. But then there are other foods that aren't quite allergenic, but we definitely do need to avoid for the first few months in life. And those are the ones that suck up a lot of nitrates from the earth. So we're talking here about spinach, Swiss chard, and beetroot. But it has also been proven that if you buy these vegetables organic, they will have less nitrates in them. So you could maybe introduce them earlier. I would definitely avoid anything with any added sugar, because you're going to really program their taste buds, and they need to discover what real sweet is, natural sweet is, through fruits, etc. As much as you can, although we do live in a real world, and they will eventually go to a birthday party, or granny will sneak in a sweetie or something like that will happen. But as long as we can avoid that, that's best. And then all these additives that are flavor enhancing as well, the glutamates, definitely avoid them, because again, they're quite addictive. And what happens, and I see this in my kids when they get more exposed to these foods as well, is that suddenly the rest of the food doesn't taste of anything. It's like, this doesn't have any flavor. And you're like, what? You're just used to that explosion of flavor that is just artificial, and it boosts their neurons. And I think it has a lot to do with attention deficiency and hyperactivity in kids these days, along with the sugar.
Absolutely.
So
yes, I totally agree with that.
Toxic.
Yes, I think that's a talk itself that it could be offered, like how all these additives are affecting us and our kids, and how much issues it is causing, from attention deficiency to autism, and all that, this excessive sugar, or the additives, the colorings, and all that stuff. I totally agree, and I also try to avoid them as much as possible, although we live in a real world, and I know that it's not always possible.
Yeah,
like kids are in preschool now, and we are going to birthday parties, and sometimes I see those cakes both in the supermarkets, full of blue colors and very, very, very colorful. I'm like, oh my god, no, please don't. And it's just like, but the funny and interesting thing is that my kids are not exposed to this on daily basis. Just sometimes when we go to, for example, to birthday parties, and they don't like it that much. They try it, and then after 2 or 3 spoonfuls, they are like, had enough.
Yeah, there you go. You see, I mean, I remember the first birthday parties my lot went to, and you can imagine that they must have been very controlled at home, and they would just run to the table while all the kids were playing, and they would be like, yay, we can eat all this rubbish, and then actually make themselves physically sick. Their body would reject it. And
exactly.
It was like, I'm so sorry, like, really bad, they don't usually get this food at home.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, they are not used to junk food. Oh, sorry, did I say it out loud?
They're just not used to seeing these things, and everybody's like, oh, you're so cruel. How can you not give this food to your child? Yeah.
No.
I felt the peer pressure too.
Yes, but I think it's just you need to find your limits, your boundaries, and what are your rules for eating at home, and stick to that. And we just, again, we need to be flexible about that. They are not living in a bubble, and they will go out, they will be exposed to that food. But again, we just need to learn to trust their instinct, that they will know when to stop. And usually they know.
Exactly.
Usually they know. You already mentioned this little giveaway that you have for our mamas who are listening to the workshop today. So can you just give us a little preview on your 3 steps to solids guide, and explain how it supports parents through each phase of introducing solids?
Sure, Eva. Yeah, I thought it would be really interesting for the families to be able to have this printout in a PDF form. So if anybody's interested in getting this, I call it my 3 steps to solids guide, where we can introduce new foods in 3 steps. So it's really simple. You can start with step 1. When you've found that your baby is loving all the foods from step 1, you jump onto step 2. And we've left the most allergenic, harder to digest foods for step 3. And by that time, usually around step 2, actually everybody's eating the same food anyway. So that's good fun. And there's a short explanation on how the system works. It all fits in 1 page. And I think it's a great guide for families to have on their fridge and see them all the way up through from day 1 of complementary feeding up to past a year.
Wow, that's really good. Super helpful. Sounds something, it sounds like a guide that I could have used as well if I knew you before. Well, Carolina, it was a great pleasure talking to you. I think everyone can take a lot out of this conversation. Thank you very much for offering this talk and all your knowledge sharing with us. And for our listeners, you will find all Carolina's details and contact details next to the video. So if you're interested in working with her or know more about her work, you can find her there. I know you have a website, but it's in Spanish, right?
Indeed, carolinaherboe.baby, but you can hit Google Translate and hopefully you'll be able to get some wonderful information from the blog there.
Yes, I'm sure they can. Well, Carolina, thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you. I hope the rest of the summit goes really well. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.